It's a wonderful place, Sullivan's Island. And since the 1670s, people have enjoyed this beautiful island by the sea. The island is exceptional in many ways, but foremost is the intermingling of its past with the present. It is rare that one gets to hear history firsthand by those who lived it. But several years ago, the Battery Gadsden Cultural Center took on the project of interviewing on videotape a number of long-standing island residents, some with families that have been on the island since the 1800s. This extremely important project provides an irreplaceable historical record of the island during this century. This program highlights some of those memories and provides a glimpse of how the island was in earlier days. There have been changes, of course, with the passing of years. But what we think you'll find is that the island itself rarely changes. Instead, what happens is as magical as the island itself. The island changes us.
Sullivan's Island, I think, in a whole, was one of the finest places that anybody could live. It was economical, it was healthy.
You didn't lock your door. You went out, you went for a week, you left it unlocked.
Like most of us were kissing kin.
Back then, you only had a few families stayed here in the wintertime. I mean, September the 1st, Labor Day, everything on this island except maybe 10 or 15 families was going to Charleston. As far as getting along, I mean, we had plenty to eat. We went shrimping and fishing and crabbing. And back then, you could get a bushel in 20 minutes, no problems.
It was just a small place with no paved streets, all dirt roads, and very few homes. And most of them that were here had big lawns, but they weren't kept, especially in the wintertime, because the folks, most of them came over in the summer. After school closed, they'd bring their geese and their ducks and the sheep, whatever they had, and stay for the summer.
The farms were mostly in the station 24 to 26 along in there.
Right where the present place of where Dr. Durst's office is was the Buckley farm lot, I'd say. In there were mules, horses and mules, and a few cows. And right across the street where the present is a Devaney pub, whatever, there was what I would call a watering hole. It was a pretty, now thinking in my memory, I wish I knew how to paint or draw this. You'd have to see this structure. And this long wooden trough. And this old pump, tall pump. And then the hired help would bring the animals up to the troughs, I guess maybe 2 or 3 times a day or how, and be sure that the animals was watered, so to speak. And that was the most impressive sight for me. It just stays with me.
We had a cistern, and everybody that collected the rainwater in the cistern, and everybody washed their own hair, and it came out soft and fluffy, and we didn't have to have all the fancy shampoos. I remember the pumps in the sinks in the kitchen where you had to prime the pumps to get the water from the cistern. And I remember most the privies that we had, and whether it was a 2-hole or a 3-hole or whatever.
Yeah, my father had at one time 3 cows in the yard.
Oh, yeah.
And milked them, and that was my job. Every in the morning, sometime in the afternoon, to deliver the milk.
Yeah, deliver the milk. We
And
delivered the milk on goat wagons. I remember wagon.
I saw in the newspaper that they had a dog pulling the wagon, but it wasn't a dog, that was my goat.
They would then deliver groceries down to the government boat that was down there. It came in by the custom house, and the boat was called the Spray Carroll. And they would just take the groceries and set them on the deck of the Spray Carroll. The Spray Carroll would come over, and the soldiers that worked on the Spray Carroll, the Spray Carroll came in this dock. They would just take the grocery bags off and set them over here on the side of the dock. And then after a while, my family would come down and get the groceries.
I attended Mamaja when we'd go ride this beautiful boat, a big boat, the Sprig Carroll. Oh, it was a joy to ride the Sprig Carroll.
My daddy had a sister that lived over in Charleston, so we came down here one time to visit her. This was around 1915. I was about 4 years old. There were 4 of us children. My oldest sister was about 7, and they told us we were going to get on the ferry boat and come over here. And when that sister heard that boat, she told them she wasn't going to get on no boat. No way was she going to get on a boat. So she didn't want to be left at home by herself, so she came with us down to the landing. When we got down there, the ferry was already over there and tied up on the Charleston side. So we just walked in and sat down on a seat in the ferry. And she thought she was in a waiting room waiting for the boat to come up. And after a while, they cast off the lines, and the ferry started across the harbor to Mount Pleasant. About middle ways out there, my aunt turned to her and said, "Well, Eunice, I'd just like a boat ride." And that's the first time she knew she had left land.
And that Sappho, when I would see that thing, I'd shout it. One time, my mother and I was on the Sappho, and as it was getting ready to dock in Charleston, I didn't realize what was happening, but I know now it was because of the tide. The boat would lean, and we thought the boat was going to turn over. I was screaming. The crewmen would take big barrels and roll it to balance the boat. And and this good priest from Stella Maris, a Father Flaming, he was there. And he spoke to us, and he comforted all of us.
Oh, streetcar. Y'all had that picture over to the restaurant that showed the mules pulling the streetcar. Where they had the dock with a boat land on the end of Sullivan's Island. And they had the streetcar on tracks, but mules was pulling it. Right.
Was there somebody in the family that drove that?
And my uncle, Bully, she talked about it now. He was the driver.
Oh, really?
In the winter time, the streetcar just made 2 trips to the Olive Farm. Of course, there wasn't but 6 houses on Olive Farm. But in the summertime, the people live in these houses and they visit the beach on the streetcar, and there's much more livelier then. Yeah. Sullivan's Island was always a kind of deserted place. In the winter time, after dark, if you visit the streets, only 3 things you saw. That's a cat, a dog, and a soldier.
we found very fascinating, I did when I came here, was the close relationship between the Army and the civilian people had really become part of the community, and the community had become part of the 8th Infantry. And that relationship I found really fascinating. The people on Sullivan's Island, as I have said one time before, when they caught shrimp and things, they would invite all the people from the fort to come to the shrimp boil, but they had none of the condiments because it was Depression times. And so the people from the fort would always bring all the tomato ketchup and the pickles and all of that sort of thing.
If it wasn't for the Army back then, we'd have been in tough shape over here because there was nothing else in the Depression coming along. And I had an aunt work down there and a cousin, and we had commissary privileges, and that really helped us.
They let us take showers down in the barracks down there. We used to eat down there. In fact, our second home was Fort Moultrie. And Mr. Avager, with Sergeant Avager, used to live right next door to us. He used to be the baker. And we used to buy bread down at the baker for 2 cents a loaf. That was the good old days. Good bread too, bread.
Oh, yeah.
I used to work on the post with the colonel, take care of 2 dogs for $5 a week. That's right. I've been taking care of 2 dogs for $5 a week, and he had another fella, he was a kitchen man, and the other lady was a cook. They get $5 a week. I get $5 a week.
I got a job down there cleaning the latrines, $2 a day.
And I helped him for
And
nothing.
he helped him. It was 60 toilets, 30 on one side and 30 on the other, and you talk about a mess. But we got $60 a month to clean those toilets.
He got 60, he'd give me a Coke.
That's all he was worth. He didn't do a good job. But that was back then when money was tough, and we would do anything to get a dollar.
Yeah, you could get a haircut for a dime.
That's right.
And it took them about a minute to give you a haircut. And even up in World War II, up on what we call the casual camp, but up in the Marshall Reservation area, there were a lot of troops that were not the troops that we knew. In other words, were outside troops that were brought in to go overseas. But even then, you could scoot in there and they'd give you a haircut, and it would just, and your haircut was over.
Then they had the recreation. They had baseball, and football out on the front, and of course anything that went on down there at the fort, you know, they just opened the doors to us, and it was real nice. It was, you know, it just a little spice in the cake.
And then they found that this was hard to keep people in the service, particularly the older men that were experienced and the ones they really wanted to keep in the service. So they started providing homes for them. And they, quite frankly, they were all just tar paper shacks, most of them. And they call it Soapsuds Alley because the women used to wash the diapers and hang them out, and it was just like a barracks, only with women and children in it, but the whole string of houses all along here, and they were tar paper shacks.
And the theater was a big
thing back
then. A big thing with theater. Now my wife tells me that at certain nights he would let the civilians go.
10 cents a ticket.
And then other nights the girls had to get some soldier to take them in.
As Anna had said, back in those days, instead of having a big consolidated mess hall like most of the forts do now, each company had its own mess hall, and there was always competition between this mess hall and my food's better than your food. And of course,
they really had terrific cooks. They really were. And every holiday, they would have family dinners, and all of the soldiers and their children and their wives would come to the family dinners. And at Christmas time, we all met at the theater, at the Post Theater, and sometimes it was a theater, and sometimes it was someplace else, but most of the time it was the theater. And we would have a Santa Claus, and one of the soldiers just loved it if one of them got to be Santa Claus. And And they always gave a package of candy and some small toy to everyone. And all of the children on the island, and all of the Army children were invited. And everyone looked forward to it. And we had no idea that it wasn't really Santa Claus, because all of the children really thought that Santa Claus came to Port Moultrie first. And it was wonderful.
Plastering those big guns on the mother bed, you know, the high hill where the playground is. When these soldiers came with the National Guard, used to come here in the summertime, used to spend a couple of weeks shooting those guns, practicing.
Large guns used to
was
raise
so
up
loud.
over the fort.
Oh, it jarred the house so much that the plastic always stay cracked up.
I remember they used to shoot. I guess they weren't shooting real bullets, but cannons. But during World War II, they'd practice. And Daddy said they might shoot our house down. So we had to buy another house down the street, a block away on the second row from the beach, in case our house got shot down during World War II.
Well, see, with the military here, we had a sense of security. When I say security, I don't mean as far as security per se. I'm talking about the jobs were down on Fort Moultrie, like closing the Navy Yard. It was military. But then they sold off Fort Moultrie, they deactivated it, and my Riviera apartment down here, this 2-bedroom apartment I got there, that's an old Army latrine. I bought that thing for $300, rolled it up to that lot, and made 2 apartments out of it, and it's been rented ever since.
I wouldn't say it was a shock, but it was sad as far as we were concerned, because as close as they are, we were very friendly. And for all those people to leave, you know, it was not a very happy time. But, I guess all good things come to an end.
So when they moved out, then they gave it all to Sullivan's Island, and they sold it. Wish I could have bought one of those little houses that sold for $4,000 on the back beach. Was your father in?
All right.
Oh man, we had nice time on and I'm gonna tell you, Bolden Alley, Mr. Simmons, you know the house with us, man Rook to 5? Bolden Alley been right there, you know? That's right. You can go in bowl if you feel like, if you don't feel like. But we just go to, we have a party at a different house over here, you know?
It wasn't like where you got to have organized recreation like today. We'd make our own recreation things to get involved. I know my mother used to raise Cain about us not coming home for meals, because I had 2 brothers and a sister, and we would all be down there on the beach.
And then the beach. I loved the beach. I lived on the beach most of my life, and we used to go about 3 times a day to the beach. Loved it. That's why I like living on Sullivan's Island, because of the beach.
We live on the beach, and I'm paying for it today. But anyway, it was real nice. And we were fortunate as children coming up. We didn't know what vandalism or anything. Nobody bothering us, and I can't ever remember really bothering a family. So it was really nice coming up then.
Going crabbing, going fishing, learning how to sink or swim, driving an automobile. The one thing that you learned when they finally got the bridge over here, that a whole new civilization was born, and you had a whole new experience, and you could, any 12-year-old kid who could drive an automobile could drive on this island 60 miles an hour, and I got caught for speeding at the age of 12. And the policeman who caught me was a Mr. Mostner from Mount Pleasant.
And then down at the end of the island, I love to go there and watch all the different ships go by. My grandfather put those rocks out on the island. On the beach in front of Stella Maris Church, my grandfather was the Army engineer to put those rocks out there. I have a picture of him doing it, otherwise I wouldn't believe it. But we just had a good time. We played, I skated on this road many times and broke open my knees, and we rode out bicycles on the beach. Then you could ride your car on the beach in the winter too, and that was fun.
Early days, the ladies of Stella Maris would have what they call lawn parties, and there was two ladies that I remember so well, Mrs. Ely and Mrs. Dillon, and they would I guess they were in charge of it. And right where up around 19 and 20 there was this property that belonged to the Devereaux, and right there was a big mansion, beautiful place, Devereaux Mansion, and right in the front of it was still part of Devereaux property. And on that area, this beautiful green lawn, Stella Maris would have this lawn parties, and they'd have the what is that wheel? Not a Ferris wheel. I forgot some wheel that
you take chances
on it, and they had great prizes, and they'd have dolls that dressed out of money. Some way or the other, somebody took a dollar bill or so and made a sleeve and a bodice and a skirt and all. And so if you were the lucky one, you won this maybe $10 or $15 doll dress.
Clean fun. Clean fun. It was really clean fun. It's a pity the kids today have got to turn towards dope and all that stuff, because I think that's terrible.
Only dope I knew was a Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
We used to call it.
I went to school, my first schoolhouse, when I was in the first grade, it's the present home of Mrs. Dan Blanchard. And then from there, the second grade was down on what they call cantonment buildings down on Old Fort Moultrie. Well, I say Old Fort Moultrie, right across from the chapel was these buildings. I was in the second grade.
I went to Sullivan's Island Elementary School up on Station 23, I guess that is now a big apartment building.
My school days on Sullivan's Island, we attended a one-room school which is located 2 houses beyond Stella Maris Catholic Church. And what's the street name? I always heard it, the Pocket. The Pocket.
Yeah,
anybody asked where you go to school, we went to school in the Pocket.
When we went to school, Ellen and I, on the government boat, and I went to St. Joseph's Parochial School. My father or mother used to give us a dime a day between us. It was an old Italian fruit stand in the market closest to East Bay, and we'd stop by that fruit stand. I'd get a nickel's worth of cake and crackers and a nickel's worth of bananas, and Ellen and I would split the bananas and the cake, and that's what we had for lunch. A dime a day. In fact, sometimes we brought sandwiches.
I got a nickel a day when I went to high school.
Man, I'll tell you. Times have changed.
That was back in the 30s, the end of the 30s. A nickel, that's all. And I used to buy a lettuce sandwich. That was the biggest sandwich you could get for a nickel. Lettuce and mayonnaise, that's all it was. God, to this day I could eat those things.
I remember in school days, this school at 23 was built. It was just 4 huge rooms, and there was a first and second grade in one room, and a third and fourth in the other, fifth and sixth, and then the fourth room they had a folding doors, and they used to open up those doors, and that was the auditorium when we had special event graduation, because I can remember from the 7th grade I graduated there. And then of course that fall going into high school I attended Mamager and they have to, we used to go, sometimes we went on the government boat. We'd get up, must have got up at 5 o'clock in the morning as well. My mother made us eat a breakfast. We had to have a breakfast. Then we'd walk down to Old Fort Moultrie's
fire station.
Behind the fire station was the dock, we call it. When we'd go ride this beautiful boat, a big boat, the Sprig Carroll. Oh, it was a joy to ride the Sprig Carroll. And then there was another one, a smaller one called the L-57. And oh, it was a treat to ride these boats. And of course we'd go into Charleston, and the boat, the government dock at Charleston was at the foot of the custom house. Well, the students would get off the boat, walk all the way from the custom house, and the girls that was going to Mamager had to go way over back of Buffane Street, or on Buffane, or St. Philip's Street. That was, and we'd get out at 2 o'clock at school, race down to catch this 3 o'clock boat to come back home. We'd get there, and oh, we had such a joy, all the kids together on the boats. We'd tell them the incidents of the day and things. And then we'd walk home. We'd get home about 4 or 5 o'clock. Well, you'd have supper. And after that, you did your homework and then hit the bed and start the next day over.
We always started out with singing songs that the teachers felt you should know that were part of your cultural heritage of the nation. And all of the children, before you got out of the 7th grade, you knew all of the words to all of the songs, like My Country 'Tis of Thee, America the Beautiful, the Star Spangled Banner. All of the songs that we think of as being part of our cultural heritage, you knew the words and the songs, and you could sing them together.
There's a Stoughton over here. You know where Mr. Reynolds live at? There's a Stoughton right there, you know, Mr. Reynolds' store. And then the Triangle had a big store up there on the corner where this cafeteria is now. Triangle had a big store there. And we had no trouble to get no grocery. And then Triangle moved and had another store up there by the water tank up to 25, where our house built now. There's a store in there. Triangle had that store.
Well, my aunt had a store down there, the old birdhouse. My aunt and her first husband bought the old birdhouse. And it was a large house, a huge house. It had dumbwaiters in it and a built-in cistern, and then it had a cistern outside. And it had not barns, but they were carriage houses on the side out in the yard where the people could come in olden days, the people would come with their carriages to visit.
And my grandfather he was our step-grandfather. He was Mr. George Truesdale, and he operated ice and wood, wasn't it?
Ice, cold wood.
Ice and hauling business.
When I first came on the island, Brannells was a place everybody hang out at Brannells. That's where Bert's Bar is now. And he sold beer and hamburgers and hot dogs and Coca-Colas, and all the young fellas used to hang out there.
And then my great-grandmother was Catherine Keenan Blanchard. Her brother, Thomas Keenan, had a grocery store on the other end of the island, and he was also postmaster there. And then my Aunt Katie was postmaster, and now my brother Gene is postmaster.
The drugstore?
Yeah.
He didn't open that drugstore until Brannells closed.
Right.
That's where he had the drugstore. Brannells closed, and Bert opened the drugstore. But you might want to mention the first drugstore.
Yeah, they had one over here in Sullivan's. There's a drugstore there.
Burmaster's.
The old doc, I think his name was Morse.
Yeah, but there wasn't Burmaster.
Burmaster owned it, but at his pharmacy. The city ran it, and he used to have a filling station on that corner, and a pool hall where the laundromat is, a restaurant run by Joe Truesdale.
But how you talk about really the king of the island back in those days was a woman. And I'm telling you, she was an institution. It was Mary Ann McGuire.
Mary Ann McGuire.
Oh my Lord, I love that lady like I love my mother.
I might mention the fact too, when I first got married, Dr. Durst had an office where the laundromat was right over there, didn't he? An office, I looked, and Otis had one where Dr. Durst was a little white house, and I would pass there, and both of them were sitting in a chair waiting on patients, and now it's just the opposite.
My great-grandfather had a store down at Station 10. Before 1900, he had a store, a grocery store, and then they lived up above the grocery store. And he owned many houses over here. He bought this house in 1900. And then my grandfather bought it from him in 1903, and then brought his family here to live. Well, it seemed like every year, when we lived on the beach, every year, come September, there was going to be a hurricane. And Daddy boarded up the house, and we put all the furniture in the middle of the floor and put rugs over it. But thank the Lord, every time we came back, ours was the least touched of any house out there.
And 1911 storm came, and we went down. My grandmother took us out the house. She said, now this is getting too bad. Let's go back in the stables. And the kids were all on the haystacks while that storm was out.
When I was hit, the first storm I went through was in 1940. We had a terrible storm then, and the water met from the back beach to the front beach out in my yard. It was about a foot deep out in the road.
My uncles had to swim around the house down the island to keep the debris from bumping into the house and knocking the house down.
Oh, really?
It must have been during the eye of the storm, because I can't imagine something.
But when Hazel, the night of Hazel, when it came through here, I can't remember the fireman. I think the fireman was Red Worth, and Charlie Walker, which is deceased now, and myself. We patrolled the island. We stayed. And I remember it very well because I drove Mr. Lowe's truck and had it filled with concrete blocks, and the wind blew so hard that when it would blow, it put me one side of the street, clean over to the other side. I burnt the clutch out of the truck. And I got fussed at from that. I said, well, you're lucky I even stayed here, let alone with that. And I stayed on Hazel, and I swore I'd never stay another one.
My uncle was the captain of a boat.
The boat that hit the bridge.
That hit the bridge. It wasn't his fault, I don't get me
Well, he
wrong.
didn't have any steam up.
He was
the night captain.
He was a night captain. But by the time they got the steam up, it was too late. It was an anchor up in the...
A dragged anchor.
It was a dragged anchor.
As we were approaching the bridge, going up the bridge, it got suddenly dark, and we had a windstorm. Wind was about 50 miles an hour. It got pitch black, dark, and we got up the bridge.
And hail.
Hail. This was on February the 28th at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I thought we were enduring an earthquake. And I tapped on the brakes with the lights on, and there were two cars in front of me when I thought as we were going up, and all of a sudden they disappeared, and I realized that I saw the bow of a ship that was 50 yards away from me.
The girl that worked in the office with me in the commissary, she was driving the truck, and she was the second one from it. The one in front of her, the car in front of her went over. There was no way they could stop. They were so on it before they could stop, but she stopped. and the girl sitting by fainted, and she backed up and got out of it. If she had fainted, it'd been too bad. They would have gone too.
All right, the first Jones that came to Sullivan's Island's name wasn't Jones, it was Vincent Peter.
No, that wasn't Jones.
Well, it was our family.
My daddy was the first Jones that come to the island.
His father was the first.
He came to the island to work on the jetties. He built this house and raised 10 children in it.
How
Or
old
12.
is this house?
Well, they moved
This
in
one, yeah.
1908.
When did they build this house, Arthur? What year did they finish the house? When Alfred was a baby?
This house is not finished yet.
Before that, our family's name was Peter. Vincent Peter. I've been told his name was Pierre, was his last name, and he came to this country, he changed his name to Peter. Not with an S, just Peter.
Where was he from?
He was from Nantes, because I found his naturalization records in Colombia, and they said he was born in Nantes. He became a citizen 1814, in June of 1814. But he was a slave trader. Either he was a slave trader or his father was a slave trader. And they used to go to Africa and trick people into getting on boats for trinkets, you know, to trade. And one of the persons that got on the boat one day was a young woman who was supposed to have been the king's daughter. And she came on board and she had gold wrapped in a handkerchief. And when the boat pulled out and the Africans realized what was happening to them, she went to the captain and tried to buy her way back. To, you know, try this gold to get them to take her back to land. And that's when he first saw her, and they said he fell in love with her right then.
It was French, right?
He was French.
So we have a French descent in our family.
Oh, several places in the family. He wasn't the only Frenchman in
But I
the
found out
family.
that the island
His aunt was French too.
But the island used to be a quarantine area for slaves, and they used to, and so we think that the one reason why they came here was because Vincent Peter was a slave dealer, and I would think he had an interest in the last people he brought over here, and then he just decided to stay here. You know? But that would make sense why he would even settle here on this island.
The family possessed freedom papers on all the people in the family, and you had to have freedom papers, you know, to say that you were free. I've heard say many people had to have their freedom papers on them, but I'm sure here on the island it didn't matter.
The thing though about our family that has kept our family so strong and so close over the years is this house. And I think my granddaddy knew what he was doing when he built it. And my grandmother was the kind of person who had a lot of sense of family, and she instilled that in us, as you see we all.
And that was handed down to her from Vincent Peter's day, because the stories of Vincent Peter and the cousin that we didn't know we had, they had the same stories, you know, and the same feeling of family. So we've always kept together, even, you know, over.
And I hope we'll be here for many, many more years.
Yeah, really.
It was real nice.
It's a good place to raise children, I think.
Well, then, there were more home folks. Now, there are a lot of doctors and lawyers, and people with money, and it has actually run up the price of buildings over there. It's getting to be a place for a lot of second homes, too. Back then, most anything you could throw together, you could live in. There wasn't much zoning back then either. It was easier to make any changes you want.
In the summertime, you had the summer residents over here, and you had a little more traffic and more people over here that, you know, during the summer, just summer homes, you know, you see. And, well, they have a lot of that now. But still, it is increased, it has grown, and there's no doubt about it. That's the best thing that ever happened to the island.
I liked it when it was the nice little shacks. We had 4 girls in the family in one bathroom and got along beautifully. Now you have to have 5 bedrooms and 5 baths.
But the only thing I really and truly wished it would happen, and I guess I'm dreaming and I'm living in the past, But I think that the people, I think there've got to be more togetherness for people today, because that's what kept us together back there.
You can shoot me out this all. It's the bestest place I ever lived in my life.